Hello, hello. I know we are a few minutes before lunch, but we have one more panel, guys, and I think it's one of the most interesting today. So can I ask you please to step forward? We have some empty seats here. That would be great. Thank you, Sam, for coming. Okay, we have 39 minutes ahead of us. And so first of all, my name is Vassilis. I am leading enterprise strategy and BD for Matter Labs, the company behind zkSync, the L2 in Ethereum. But my job today is to be the moderator. And to be honest with everyone, I'm super excited and genuinely looking forward to this conversation because zkML is such a hot topic, right? It's very rare that we have builders and very, amazing entrepreneurs in that space. And all of us, I think, were very active on Twitter and Farcaster, and we very rarely get the chance to sit down and discuss all those things. And just as an example, like, I was preparing this panel the last days, and since Friday, we have so many amazing announcements, right? For example, Niraj Ritual announced the partnership with Eigenlayer. Congratulations about that. Cathie, Hyper Oracle, but now it's called AOA, you announced your AI Oracle on top of your zk Oracle, so another announcement, congratulations about that. Daniel from Modulus, you announced 30 minutes ago your new prover, so looking forward to hearing more. Mistral announced their new NLM, so the industry is heating up, and I believe that we will have a very insightful conversation. I was planning to do the intros for each one of the panelists, but since this is a very fluid industry and things change every day, I would ask each one of you to introduce yourselves and a few words about your companies, or at least the companies you have co-founded, and we can take it from there. Daniel?
Sure. Hey, excuse me. Oh my goodness. Hi, everybody. I'm Daniel. I'm the CEO of a company called Modulus, or Modulus Labs, for those of you in the know. And yeah, I mean, we're a zkML company. We're one of the first, along with some of the lovely folks in the audience. And specifically, we work on AI inference, as I think is the case for many of us on stage, but making sure that we can bring large, sophisticated models on chain with really kind of the most bleeding edge in the zk literature. Yeah.
Cathie?
Yeah. That was loud. Thank you. So I'm Cathie, Chief Scientist at Aura, previously known as Hyper Oracle. So we have been known as a verifiable Oracle protocol. Our core product has long been zk Oracle, but recently we have debuted our AI Oracle as well, on-chain AI Oracle, OAO, using our a technology or a stack that we have invented called optimistic machine learning, OPML. So I'm not going to get too much into that since I know there's a question upcoming.
I will. Okay. Michael?
Hey, I'm Michael. Hello? Okay, there we go. Hey, I'm Michael. I'm CEO of Fabric Cryptography. We're building general purpose hardware for accelerating cryptography by orders of magnitude. Our end goal is to make all of this cryptography like zk super ubiquitous and ingrained in everything.
Hey guys, my name is Niraj, and I'm a co-founder at Ritual, and the goal of Ritual is to really make it easy to connect AI or smart contract applications to AI models and cover all of the infrastructure in between that process.
That's great. Thank you all. And by the way, guys, everyone on the crowd, I'm going to ask provocative questions today, so hopefully it's going to be a very insightful conversation for you. So some housekeeping. I will address questions to specific individuals in the panel, but you're all free to jump in rather than doing the whole, row thing. So I will start with you, Daniel. Let's start with the usual question, which I think is the most important one. Why zkML? Like, why zkML is important? And just to make the question a little bit harder, why zkML for Web 2 and why zkML for Web 3? I think the answer is not the same, and I would love to pick your brains on that.
Yeah, this is maybe the most important question, right? It's certainly the one that we try to answer every day with the research we do, the applications we integrate. I think most of us on this panel are either founders or early employees at our startups. And we have the great privilege in our position, at least I feel that I do, to think in really long terms, right? Not just in like 5 years or 10 years, but in 100 years, right? What is going to happen in the world, right? And one of the questions that I've been wrestling with is, this year there are however many doctors, and next year there will be probably more doctors, and so on and so forth. And in 1 year, there will be less doctors, and there will be less lawyers, and less bankers, not to scare y'all who might have those vocations in your lives. Because AGI is coming, right? It's like very simple for me, right? Or at least sufficiently sophisticated AI models, which are cheaper and more performant than human beings, will enter our society, will become a bigger slice of our compute diet as a society, right? In that world, it seems to me that AI accountability, right, i.e. the kind of tax or the pipeline to connect model providers and the results we need from the AI models to the services that we rely on, this will become one of the most important pieces of our infrastructure, again, as a society, right? And so when you take this long view, zkML, or at least accountable AI through cutting-edge cryptography, feels like, to me, one of the most important things to work on today. And I just want to work on important things. So that's like a very, very high-level answer. I guess the very, very low-level or short-term answer is, quite frankly, we expect compute integrity in Web3. And so even from that kind of longer-term view, it's like, all right, crypto is this amazing beachhead market for us to get this right before we bring these values to the rest of the world, especially when cryptography is advancing so quickly because of the folks on this stage and beyond.
That's great, and it's very inspiring indeed, and I share the same passion with you, Daniel. Niraj, quick question. If I am a Web2 developer, a machine learning scientist, and I have no idea about Web3, and I don't want to have any idea about crypto, why zkML is important for me, if I'm a Web2 guy?
So I would, I'd echo a lot of what Daniel said. I think what the meta is in AI today is that there are hundreds of millions of users already using big AI products, using the diffusion models, using the LLMs. And the direction it's going is they're controlled by centralized corporations that have, 10, 15-person board members. We saw at the OpenAI fiasco in November. We saw with Gemini this week. I think the important thing is we have an alternative. In some ways, you can analogize it to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not money for everyone, but it's important that we have that non-state alternative. I think very similarly, we need a non-state, non-corporation controlled AI. Whether it's at the model level, at the data level, at the compute level, it's important to have this alternative. And so the verifiability element to me is important in building this toolkit, in addition to other things we'll probably talk about, like privacy and things of that nature.
That makes sense, because the reason I'm asking that question is because I think there is some confusion in the public about zkML. Many people conflate zkML, first of all, with blockchain, which is not necessarily the same thing, as we'll discuss, number one. And number two, zkML and decentralized AI, again, it's not the same thing. So suppose my question to you, Niraj, was, and to everyone, was because zkML can also do the following. Can verify that something, an inference, was generated by ChatGPT. Again, a very centralized model, but still provide some kind of transparency that I think we're all seeking. So that was the point of that. And which, Niraj, your answer leads me to another question to you, Cathie. And I know you have done amazing, groundbreaking work on the OPML that you recently said, the optimistic machine learning, right? So walk us through a little bit about what OPML is, the same way that Daniel described about zkML, and what is the differentiating value prop? Like, why OPML versus zkML?
That's a loaded question. And I want to also, jump in
Sure.
into a previous question as well. I think that actually would bring a good flow into OPML. So I think, so testing. Testing. Yeah, so that's not, okay. So I think it's as Niraj said, it's an option, right? It's an option for developers where it's different layer of, or different level of a spectrum of security guarantee, of verifiability, and with different trade-offs. So I think like Web2 centralized endpoint API is on one end of the spectrum, and zkML or perhaps FHE or MPC in the future was at the other side of the spectrum. And I think OPML, the reason why we invented it is we really wanted an alternative that someone can literally deploy machine learning on chain with some certain, well, with a good level of security guarantee. And that's somewhere sitting between zkML and a Web 2 point of view, right? It's not saying that we're less secured. It's saying that there are, so to explain a little bit about what optimistic machine learning, OPML is, so we have CK rollups and OP rollups, right? Where CK rollups, they use a sequencer and also a prover to generate a proof of their transactions and submit the root onto L1 for verification, right? Whereas OP rollups takes a totally different approach, an optimistic systems where we trust the results that was first submitted, and then we have sort of a network of verifiers or validators to try to challenge that result should they found that there's any inaccuracies. So the same thing can do with OPML as well, which is for zkML, everything is guaranteed by the ZK circuit or the ZK VM itself, and it's full verifiability immediate. Whereas for OPML, we also trust a submitter to post the results on chain first, and within a certain challenge period, there could be other challengers that come and challenge that result until that result is finalized. So it sits kind of in between zkML and Web 2 as a viable alternative for reasonable finalized time, as well as very cheap compute. I think that's probably one of the biggest advantage, because with OPML you can do pretty much native execution, meaning like you can achieve speed as quick as you just run in a Web 2, like on a GPU, with normal machine learning inference.
Got it. That's very helpful.
And
congratulations.
I kind of want to add a few words to this too, because, I think zkML, I actually come from an AI hardware background. My last company was an AI hardware company. And so I faced what you were talking about, Vassilis, firsthand, which is this, there is, maybe like 5 companies on Earth that'll buy an AI training product, right? And being able to actually go the next step is not just important for Web3, to decentralize, let's say, the entire AI landscape. It also helps the Web 2 people, because, when we face the choice of how to design our hardware, we're designing basically for this tiny audience of a few hundred people on Earth. And, being able to decentralize that audience is incredibly compelling, just from what hardware are these Web 2 people going to have access to? Who's it designed for? Who does it serve? What are these models designed for, right? Who do they serve? I think another angle on it is also that when you look at ChatGPT, a few months ago, someone pointed out that it was getting lower and lower quality. And this is something that, everyone thought, okay, that's kind of crazy because I'm paying this much per token. I should get, this amount of quality. Well, you don't know what you're getting. It's kind of fuzzy, right? Like, if I type in the same query to ChatGPT 3.5 or 4, I sometimes have trouble telling which is which. And to, Daniel's point of basically there's this, need for regulated industries to start using ML. Well, you're going to have to attest to the fact that the model was of a certain quality if you're going to give legal advice, medical advice, financial advice. That's going to have to happen, right? And it's going to be pushed by regulators, and it's going to be pushed by society,
Correct.
as a whole.
Right now, many things are behind the black box, as you said. Which,
Exactly.
Michael, I think it would be interesting for the crowd, everyone here, to describe a little bit about Fabric, right? And share a little bit more detail about your VPU, because I think it's a very inspiring thing, and I think it will advance the whole zkML and OPML industry. So that would be good for you to share some info.
Yeah, thank you. So the VPU is basically our answer to the GPU for cryptography. So we're actually not just focused on zkML, we're focused on accelerating all sorts of things, including fully homomorphic encryption and all sorts of future cryptography that we might not even have thought of today, right? So when I first looked at the scientific literature around ZK, around FHE, around summer of 2022, one observation I actually had was, hey, this looks a lot like AI in 2012 or 2014. It's the early days. The compute is growing exponentially. The functionality increases with compute. And so what if we're able to accelerate this by orders of magnitude?
just like GPUs in the decade of the 2010s accelerated by orders of magnitude all of these AI models and led to enabling things like ChatGPT, right? Neural nets were invented in the 1930s. Jan LeCun was doing CNNs in 1989, but here we are, ChatGPT finally came out in the 2020s, right? And that's because of compute. And so what we hope is that we enable that same kind of ubiquity for cryptography.
Thank you, Michael. That's really good. I have a question regarding anytime there is hardware in the conversation, regardless of whether it's in zkML or any other field, there is always this, at least for me, there is always this elephant in the room, which is hardware is somehow inherently centralized. Like you have to rely to a company, call it Nvidia, call it Fabric, call it whatever you want, that you have to rely on them to get the GPU or the VPU, right? So what are your thoughts about how something which is inherently centralized, like a hardware company, can progress something which is very decentralized as a Web3 industry?
That's a really great question. Very spicy today. How I would put it is, there's a difference between the centralization of power and control in society and the question of who gets to dictate which direction this Basilisk goes, right? Like, who gets to say what the dominant AI is going to actually embody as its core values, right? I was looking at this decomposition of ChatGPT, and they were looking at like, okay, what are like some of the mean concepts? Like when you average out all the like vectors for things, like what's at the heart? And the concepts at the center were very disturbing. Like right outside this inner core of like very abstract stuff, there were like things about women being abused, there were things about that. And it's like, okay, this is the subconscious that society is imprinting into this. And so who gets to decide what training data goes into this or how the model actually gets developed is the person deciding essentially what's subliminally being implanted into all of humanity, right? And I think that's an incredibly important problem. And whichever form the solution takes, I'm a fan of that. And one of the awesome things about accelerating ZK is that we get to be a part of decentralizing the power, the control of these models. We get to make these models accessible to everyone. We get to break down these barriers, not just in terms of the margins that all of the incumbents are charging, right? But in terms of the control of like the values that get put into these models. And that's incredibly compelling. And then there's the centralization of platform, which I think is more, what you're talking about. And I would say the biggest centralized platform today, everyone can guess who it is. And that's the problem, right? Like the problem is lock-in, the problem is these centralized platforms. And again, accelerating ZK to the point where it becomes viable to do zkML in any feasible amount of time, okay, that's what we want to do. Our hardware is accelerating this stuff by orders of magnitude. If we can decrease the overhead verifiability to a tolerable level, then we can break down that kind of centralization as well, right? As an AI hardware company, when I tried to break into the space, it was incredibly hard for me to sell to the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Googles, and the Microsofts. It's a long sales cycle. You sell 1 million at first, and then once you win the contract, it's this giant contract, right? But if there were a decentralized network, maybe AI hardware startups would get to compete in an open, free market, right? And that's the kind of decentralization that I'm a fan of, and ZK hardware is going to enable.
That's a great answer. And I think you alluded to a point to which I agree, and I want to come back in a few minutes in that, which is that, so what you actually said from a philosophical point of view, Michael, is that some technologies are shifting the Overton window of Web 2 by intruding to the business model, which I think we see that already. We see that open model AI, open AI models and open weight models have now become part of the of the norm. We saw the Mistral announcement a few hours ago, so I think I completely agree, and I think we will see more and more change in that. Let's go back a little bit on the actual numbers, or at least the performance. So, Daniel, you announced a few hours ago your new prover. Congratulations. Where are we on the latest benchmark on zkML, like as of today?
Yeah, this is what we spend all our time thinking about. So I have really specific answers. I think I'll start with like, what is the state of the art, right? And the state of the art is, and no ZK company, maybe besides ZK Sync, will talk maybe too honestly about this. And that is the literal computational overhead of ZK as compared to just naive compute, right? Like kind of the trusted model, right? And generally speaking, with a generic, we call them generic anyways, ZK proving system, it's on the order of about 10 to the 5th or 10 to the 6th, right? So, I don't know, like 10,000 times overhead, right? So you can imagine going to OpenAI and saying, hey, Sam, I know you're raising like $7 trillion, whatever, but we're gonna have to take your monthly inference costs and multiply it by 10,000x, right? And I think when you think about the solution space like this, not to offend anyone on stage, but you start to go, okay, let's figure out smart ways to take shortcuts. Let's like find optimistic solutions. Let's find all the rest. I guess the Modulus standpoint, right? Our kind of perspective is ZK is the endgame solution. It will not be 1% of future AI compute is ZK proven. It will be like 90%, right? And the rest is like trusted because they're frivolous and nobody cares. When you take that worldview, ZK acceleration is not just something that kind of would be nice, but is strictly needed. And really the good news there is we are well on our way, right? So our kind of specialized prover that is in production, putting hundreds of thousands of AI results on chain, kind of already in the past few months, the overhead is about 180x in production, right? And that's on CPU. That's before Michael does his magic, right? And just kind of for a frame of reference, right? Let's take kind of the smallest LLM that I'm aware of, which is really performant, which is probably like Llama, 7 billion param, right? That does inference on CPU about 100 millisecond per token, right? And so right now we're kind of on the order of like 100x. My aspiration is that with Michael's help, we can get probably down to about 10x, right, in that regime. And you're looking at a second per token from a really performant LLM, right? Suddenly this like future that's like 100 years away doesn't look so far away at all, right? And so, again, just my opinion. Feel free to couch it however you wish, but nearly all AI compute in the long term will be ZK proven because it is a better product, and the world drives or is driven by superior products.
Cathie.
And I'll add to that. In the 2010s, I think Jensen Huang from Nvidia recently published this. In 10 years, there was a 1,000,000x increase in the amount of AI compute that the best models were able to train on. 1,000,000 times. And some of that came from scalability and like advanced networking technologies like modern photonics. And some of that came from the fact that the chip itself got maybe 1,000 times better, right? We went from the low teraflop, high 100 gigaflop range to the petaflop range per chip. And really, that's our roadmap. We want to replicate that Nvidia Miracle again and bring it to the world of cryptography.
It's amazing. Cathie, do you have any, I wouldn't say answer, but like your point of view on what Daniel said about zkML?
Yeah, no, I would certainly like to respond to Daniel's comment as well. So just for context, I was the zkML research lead at Ethereum Foundation, and I still love zkML as a whole. Like, I don't think it's a technology that we shouldn't develop, right? And I don't think, but at the same time, I don't think doing like optimistic systems is taking a shortcut, unless, especially on the overhead discussion, unless your overhead is like 1x, right? Like the same as just doing the compute purely without trust, with trust assumptions and etc. There's always people or users who would prefer to use a non-ZK version. So I think I don't disagree with Daniel that zkML is the end game for fully verifiable AI with an immediate sort of finality, right? Immediate verification. But it's, and I also don't think other system than zkML is mutually exclusive. One of the questions when I was researching on zkML, and a lot of questions that I get from the audience is like, well, if the model is open source, right? Technically, I can always locally reproduce the results, right? So why would I need zkML to guarantee that? Of course, it could be access to hardware, access to internet, but it could be, right? Like, so, okay, even if someone does a computation and tell me that's the answer, I do it on my side, that's 2x, right? And that's still way cheaper than 180x, although, yeah, the numbers are way too specific. So I think I don't think optimistic systems is a shortcut. Actually, I think even when we reach the end game of zkML, optimistic systems are still going to stay.
You're optimistic about optimistic, right?
Yes.
But, sorry, Daniel, just a
I
comment.
just wanted to say that Cathie and I are friends, like in real life, so it's okay.
But I think, Cathie, you said something which I personally agree a lot. And as I said, I did a lot of reading the past days just to read all your blog posts and your recent work. And also Niraj, your co-founder, was tweeting a lot about OPML and zkML. And I think it's a very healthy debate. And I think, Cathie, you said something which really resonates, which is we, meaning the whole industry, we should leave behind this scarcity mindset. It's either or. Maybe there are some AI inference which is not that critical importance, that can be OPML. So it's not either or. Both of them can, live together and make each other better. And I think we can have such an environment. Niraj, I'm moving to you to discuss a little bit about let's call it the business modeling of zkML and the go-to-market. I know that me and you, we have various calls in the past, and I'm a very go-to-market oriented person. I will tell you which are the models that I see emerging from various startups in the space, but you are one of the leaders, so definitely I want to hear your opinion. So there is one model which is, let's build a crypto protocol that will use incentives, and let's bring developers, validators, stakers, and people who can use, and this economic incentive to keep the protocol safe and steady. So that's one model, right? And I think you are going to that direction. If I'm not mistaken, you currently have Infernet, but you will soon have your own sovereign chain, right? So that's one. Do you see any other models? Do you see a model where it's more of an API or a software as a service, for the lack of a better word, where people can just, generate proofs for their inference and they can use it based on what they want? Tell me which models do you see as the most dominant right now in the zkML space?
To me, the most exciting one is to make it the most crypto-native form of payment. So you do a call, and then you pay in ETH. I think it's, initially when we started the company, a lot of people asked us, why not just do this off-chain and then prove it on-chain, or, why not just have it as a sort of a SaaS service? And my answer is, it's just awkward to have a DAO that's using AI to then have like a credit card. So I prefer this model a lot. I also think the nice thing about AI compute is the transaction value is so much greater than just traditional payments. Most of the payments that happen on chain are usually smaller size, not much is happening. But if you're doing inference on like a large model, that's like a pretty significant amount of compute that's being used, and I find that really promising and exciting to bring a whole new generation of users into the AI crypto space. You didn't even mention, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff. Monetizing models, monetizing data. Yeah. So I'm excited to see all these projects on stage experimenting with new ways to do monetization of different parts of the stack, and then let's see what sticks. I think we'll have very good information in 1 year. Kind of reminds me of, the layer 2 space 3 years ago, where no one thought that space was going to be a profitable space. Everyone said the value is going to flow back to ETH. Why would you invest in a layer 2 project? And now it's very clear that that's not true. And layer 2s are quite valuable. So I think we're kind of in that early kind of iteration of this space.
That's great. And you mentioned monetization, which I think it's a good segue to another question I want to ask all of you. How do we attract more Web 2 people? As I said at the beginning, how do we make sure that machine learning developers, scientists say, okay, I'm going to try Infernet, or I'm going to try Ritual's new chain, or Aura, or whatever. How is it through monetization or incentivization to bring your data or to fine-tune your models? Is this the way to do that, or is there a more, what's the right word? A more philosophical kind of value proposition, which is, come here and everything is open and decentralized, and at least it's more transparent. What are your views? Let's start with you, Daniel.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And full disclosure, I was a philosophy minor in my undergrad, and I can tell you that people generally don't give a shit about philosophy, like in the real world, right? Which is super disappointing. But what they do care about are better products, right? And kind of what I always point to is our early use cases, right? When you look at, for example, what WorldCoin is doing with us, right? Approving biometrics on the edge in a privacy-preserving manner without ever sharing that data over any network of any kind, right? You throw your phone in the river, there goes your iris image. That's like really powerful, and it's a best-in-class product because of zkML, and nothing else on the market can deliver that, right? We have a partnership with a company called Upshot, which is using sophisticated AI models to appraise NFT values so you can build interesting financial derivatives on top of it, as well as other asset classes. And then we zk prove, of course, their AI price feed, basically, and it becomes as though those prices came from the chain. Right? Again, this is like super weird product that just cannot find a Web2 analog for, besides like something that involves really heavy trust assumptions. And finally, like Ion is literally building an insurance company on chain with an AI model that predicts risk, and then zk proving that so that it is a more trustworthy product as compared to any of its peers, right? And so I know it's kind of a cop-out, but I earnestly believe that fundamentally, if we want to attract people to come, yes, DevX is important, yes, unit economics are important, but fundamentally, you have to translate that into applications that are best in class, and then people look at that and go, oh shit, I want some of that, right? I'll come and I want to duplicate that, I want to build that, right? Like, make no mistake, 200x, 200,000x, 2x, whatever the overhead, this is a premium product. And I think Palmer Luckey said that, before everyone can afford it, everyone has to want it. Yeah.
That's a good advice. Cathie?
Yeah, so as a former machine learning engineer myself, I think actually the developer experience is also quite important. It has to be sort of a seamless transition from what they're used to, like the tech stack they're used to, into the tech stack that we use sort of in Web3, in zkML, in OPML, etc. I think at Aura, though, we do deal less with the incentive system. I think we have already seen success in the space, such as BitTensor with like using incentives. I think the goal at Aura is to really first introduce frameworks that we think would be a viable product route for a lot of these products, right? So that's why I introduced OPML, just to tease a little bit. As I said, like OPML and zkML is not exclusive, so I also have a preprint coming tomorrow at our own event. We have our team here if anyone is interested in our own event. So framework, and these frameworks are tech agnostic, right? So we have our own implementation of OPML, but you don't have to use our implementation of OPML, although we would prefer you do. And we do deal with the incentive structure, but we do wish that when someone figure all these out, we will be the infrastructure that they can plug and play. So a lot of people ask, right, whether we are decentralized compute. We're not. But we are hoping that our tech stack can plug into different sort of decentralized compute infrastructure in the future. So yeah, we will remain a protocol. We won't deal with sort of like the incentives side of stuff. But that's sort of like our vision here.
So protocol and execution agnostic. That's great. Michael?
And for me, I've sold to a bunch of these guys, and I can say for sure, they're all looking at the same stuff. They're looking at the cost to compute, and they're looking at the time it takes to train, and they're looking at the cost of inference and the time it takes to deploy. And for me, the day that a decentralized AI offering is easier, cheaper for Web2 devs to deploy on, and you can deploy a bigger model, and you can give them more training data with a Web3 approach or a decentralized approach in some form cryptographically protected, and you're able to solve their critical issues around IP and stuff like that, or regulatory compliance, you solve these problems for the end user, and then they're happy. And I don't think that day is far off. I think there's going to come a day, not too far in the future, where it is cheaper to do a decentralized AI than a centralized one.
Niraj, can I ask you a question based on what Michael said? I will tell you what is my concern. And again, I have been very active in the space. I believe a lot in zkML. My concern, and tell me if it's a crazy concern, if I'm like hallucinating, is that a very centralized LLM, let's take ChatGPT just for the sake of the conversation. Again, Sam Altman, very smart guy, also very involved in Web3 with WorldCoin, right? He takes zkML and then he can go and pretty much create an additional value proposition about ChatGPT and say, hey, now that every time you ask something to ChatGPT, I will give you a proof that it was trained on X data, or I used those weights or those fine-tunings. And it will make it a Web 2 value proposition, and it will kill all the Web 3 decentralized AI models. First of all, am I crazy to think about that? Because, by the way, guys, I spent 10 years at Microsoft, so maybe I'm fine-tuned myself to think in Web 2 terms. But like, what am I missing here, Niraj?
My thinking would be they certainly could add it, but the value proposition of crypto AI is not just the verifiability or just the privacy. Like to what Daniel said earlier, I think the most exciting piece of all of this is creating these new like crypto native AI things that you can only uniquely do on blockchains. Being able to tokenize a model and own it and govern it, you can't really build that on OpenAI infrastructure. Same thing with data provenance, just better to have that on a blockchain. And same thing with compute. And I think if OpenAI does add proofs, that's a great future for humanity, but I don't think it's really compatible with their value system anyway.
Good idea. We have 4 minutes. I want to do 2 things. Either, if any of you have any questions, I know it's not part of the structure of the conversation, happy to take any questions or comments from the crowd. And if you don't, I want to ask each one of you as a closing statement. We will be here next year for sure, ETH Denver 2025, and hopefully we will be in the same stage, the 5 of us, because it's a great conversation. Daniel, Cathie, Michael, everyone, Niraj, what do you think we will be discussing in 1 year from now? What do you think zkML will be in a year from now?
Well, I think that, look, I'm very confident that tomorrow the provers will be more efficient than they are today, but that's boring, right? Yeah, so sure, we'll go faster. But really, and I think we're all probably in agreement on this, what I really want to happen by the time we're here next year is incredible applications, right? Like we're talking like exactly what kind of Niraj just mentioned, like shit that just doesn't exist anywhere else, right? And yeah, I think that's how I'll know that we're actually moving the needle in the world, right? I mentioned at the top that I want to work on hard problems. There is no harder problem than building real utility, be it through a protocol, through SaaS, through tokens or whatever, right? So I want to see that. I want us to push really hard at that. That's a huge priority for Modulus. You'll hear a lot more about it from us in the next few months. But yeah, brilliant applications, better cryptography, of course. That's next year.
Great answer. Cathie?
Yeah, I think this is more my personal vision more than Aura's vision, but to ride on what Daniel said about like a killer use case or killer application, I personally would really love to see a crypto cross AI application kick off that people would want to use, love to use, not just because of tokenized model or revenue sharing or airdrop potential, but something that people actually are excited that they are willing to pay the fee to play around with it, to use it. Yeah, and something that's unique to the blockchain. That would be cool.
Super.
I hope to be here next year with an actual machine that's being manufactured in volume that is accelerating zkML. And what I hope is also that that lowers the overhead so much that we're seeing a thriving ecosystem of these DePIN projects take off. Because what I hope is that, hey, if the overhead of decentralization can come lower than the overhead and the rent-seeking inherent to a centralized AI ecosystem, we're going to see a mass migration to the DePIN ecosystem. We're going to see a mass migration to DAC and decentralization.
My bold prediction is I think we will have millions of users of crypto AI applications in 1 year. And I think it's because it's attracting all the smartest minds in the space, it's attracting a bunch of capital, and it's attracting a bunch of attention. And I think those 3 things will build this into a really exciting titan of this crypto industry. So I'm looking forward to kind of all these things and then ultimately funneling that back into being AI crypto as one of the greatest, sort of entry points for crypto people.
That's amazing. Thank you all. I think it was a very interesting conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. We give you 40 seconds back to go enjoy your lunch. But we can all catch us after the talk. Happy to catch up. But thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Vassilis.